Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Suzanne Peterson, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Captain Nick Tate. We warmly welcome the family of Private John Henry Andersen, whose story will be told shortly. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services Leagues of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by family and visitors to the memorial. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem. If able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they'd done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved. And here we guard the record that they themselves made. Tonight we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament. Flowers of the forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private John Henry Andersen. John Henry Andersen was born on the 10th of January 1881 to Lars and Rebecca Andersen of Gladstone, Queensland. He was the eldest of 6 children, 5 of whom survived infancy. In October 1899, after a worsening political deadlock in southern Africa, Boer forces invaded the British colonies of Cape Colony and Natal. Britain declared war on the two Boer republics, the Orange Free State and the South African Republic. In support of the British Empire, each of the Australian colonies committed troops to the conflict. During 1900, British commanders in South Africa called for more mounted infantry to be sent. These soldiers were needed due to the nature of the fighting over the wide open veldt and against highly mobile mounted Boer soldiers. Military authorities in the Australian colonies now called for volunteers with excellent horse riding, shooting and bush skills. It was hoped that the men with these skills would bring an advantage to the British regular army troops in the field. These new volunteer units were known as Bushmen's contingents. Andersen volunteered for service in early 1901 and was selected. Andersen joined the colony of Queensland's 5th contingent, known as the Queensland Imperial Bushmen, because they were paid for by the British government rather than the colony. The contingent embarked at Brisbane in early March 1901 on the transport ship Templemore and arrived at Port Elizabeth in the Eastern Cape Colony at the beginning of April. The British had captured the two Boer capitals, Bloemfontein and Pretoria, the previous year, so by 1901, the war in South Africa had firmly entered its guerrilla phase. This involved lengthy pursuits of the remaining Boer forces against vast tracts of land. It was proving difficult and frustrating to bring these elusive bands to bay in order to finally end the war. Following Lieutenant General French's drive through eastern Transvaal in February 1901, the following month, Lord Kitchener aimed to subjugate northern Transvaal. His plan was to send a column to occupy Petersburg as a base from which they would work southwards along the line of the Oliphant River, in cooperation with columns moving northwards to meet them. One of their main objectives was to trap and destroy the commando under the Boer leader, Ben Viljoen. From Port Elizabeth, the Queensland Imperial Bushmen travelled by rail to Petersburg in the northern Transvaal, arriving on the 11th of April. There, they joined a large force made up mostly of British colonial units under Brigadier General Herbert Plummer. Attached to Colonel Jeffrey's corps, the Queenslanders moved out on the 14th of April in a southeasterly direction and were engaged on outpost and patrol duties along Oliphant's River. On the 26th of April, they had their first contact with the enemy near Tabakplaats camp, where a brisk skirmish ensued. Lieutenant James Loynes of the contingent described the fighting that broke out shortly after 2 p.m. "We were in a tight place, the Boers pouring in a crossfire from both sides of the valley," he wrote in a letter home. The fighting continued until 9 p.m. During the action, Andersen was killed. 2 other men of the contingent, Private Cuthbert Moeller and Private Edward Hunt, were also killed. Private John Henry Andersen was 20 years old. He is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among almost 600 Australians who died while serving in the South African War. His photograph is displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private John Henry Andersen, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and your continued support during the Memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.